Hello, welcome back once again to Algebra. Today we're going to start working on the next step in graphing in that more complex way I talked about in the last episode. Remember last episode we started talking about how to graph using the chart, but today we're going to start learning about the new algebraic way to graph, which is by using the slope intercept form, which looks like this. Okay, now this may look a little confusing to you, but this is a kind of a standard equation model that we've been looking at in algebra now for probably months. You just haven't noticed it. Okay? In these equations, we've got y equal to some number times x plus b, which is just some other number. Okay? Now these special numbers here are actually important, and they can be used to help us graph in an easier way. Now the number in front of the x here I have written down is called the slope. Okay, the slope is how much your line is going to be changing as you move across the board. Okay, now slope can be either a fraction or a whole number, but just remember that slope is always how much your y is changing over how much your x is changing. Okay, so basically it's how much is your line going up and how much is your line going over, right? So for instance, let's say our slope was 1/2 here. That would mean that for everything, right, your line is going up 1 square and over 2. If your slope was 4, it means it's going up 4 squares and over 1, right? So your slope is telling you how much your line is changing as you're graphing it on the grid. Don't worry, we're going to go over an example so you can see exactly what I mean. Now the b here is what's called the y-intercept. This number on the end over here indicates where your line crosses the y-axis. Pretty helpful. So it's going to give you a starting point for your graphs at all times. Pretty useful. Let's do an example so you can see what I mean. We'll use the old table way of graphing, and then I'll show you how the slope intercept version works. All right? All right, let's switch boards. Here we go. We've got our new board, we've got our graph. I even have our table set up. So our equation for this one is going to be y equals x plus 1. So if we plug in our values like we did in our last video, we're going to get -1 plus 1 is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. Come on, marker. Close enough. So now we can plot these points, and we'll get -1, 0, 0, 1, and 1, 2. And we get our line. There it is. Looks stellar. Okay. Now when it comes to the y-intercept version, or the slope intercept version of it, we need to break this equation down a little bit more. Hi, buddy. I'm still making a video. I'll be back in a moment. There's my little helper Cameron. All right. So here I've rewritten the equation, and I've got y is equal to the m, which is 1, x plus 1, or b. Okay. Now, in the last part, I showed you that b is the y-intercept. It's where the graph hits the y-axis. And if you take a look, our graph using the chart hit the y-axis at 1, just like our equation said. Oh. And then remember I told you that our slope, right, is the change in y over the change in x. And if you notice, each dot is 1 up and 1 over, just like this fraction here, right? Up 1, over 1. Pretty cool. Let's do another line really quick, and we'll just do the slope intercept version. Here's our new equation. It says y equals -1/2 minus 2. Well, first we're going to find our y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is the b, and so it's whatever number is in the back here without the x. Okay, in this case, it's -2. So that means our new line is going to hit the y-axis at -2. -2 is right here, so we're going to put a dot right there. All right, we know our line is going to hit that point. Perfect. Now for the next part, we need to take a look at our slope. Now remember, in our slope, the top number is how much our y value is changing. In this example, it's going down 1, -1. So that means our line is going to be going down 1. And then our bottom, our denominator part of our slope, is 2, which means it's going to the right 2. So we've gone down 1 over 2. And you can continuously do that over and over again. Down 1 over 2. And you can continuously do that until you get as many points as you need to make your line. It is just that simple. That's all there is to slope-intercept graphing. It takes some time to get used to, but it's pretty useful. One last thing I'd like to point out before we end. Notice this. The slope of this one, our first line we did over here, was a positive number, and our graph was going up to the right. And our second one had a negative slope, -1/2, and it's going down to the right. That's intentional. Positive slopes go up to the right, and negative slopes go down to the right. Something to keep in mind. Thank you so much for watching yet another episode of Algebra. Next time, we're going to talk about what happens when the equation doesn't look exactly the way we need it to before we start graphing. See you next time on Algebra.